My wife, Elizabeth, has always been an incredible partner. She's tall and slender, with a striking mix of brown and blonde hair, and a figure that turns heads wherever she goes. When we first met, the sparkle in her eyes reminded me of a child seeing gifts under the tree on Christmas morning. My name's Tati, I'm 6A, and thanks to my years on the swim team, I have the classic swimmer's physique. Our friends would often tease us, saying our constant smiles gave away our feelings. For the first 2 years, our relationship was electric. And our meetups were almost always about that deep connection. Things changed when Elizabeth made a mistake involving Glenn, a man who stood about 6'EA and played basketball. Out of nowhere, my phone began buzzing with messages and photos from a party she'd attended. It appeared that she had kissed him and then disappeared into his room. The next morning, I confronted her, and she admitted that she'd gotten drunk and made a foolish decision. She insisted it meant nothing, and that her heart still belonged to me. Most of our friends argued it was a one-time thing, urging me to forgive her. After 2 weeks of intense anger, I decided to let it go, but made it clear that she wouldn't get another chance. Ironically, the friends who pushed for forgiveness often ended up in troubled relationships, while the ones who told me to walk away are now happily married. Eventually, I began a career as a programmer, and Elizabeth took a job as an administrator. We married and had 2 children, Frederick and Monica. Life was good until Elizabeth entered real estate, which meant longer hours and less family time. Knowing her history, I decided to install monitoring software on her phone and slipped a small recorder into her bag. Soon I discovered she was seeing a man named Joe. Heartbroken, I clung to the hope that their chats seemed to lack any deep affection. Desperate to fix things, I tried harder cooking her favorite meals, dressing up the kids, and showering her with as much love as I could. She responded positively, giving me a sliver of hope. One Friday night, she told Joe she couldn't meet up with him, and I was thrilled. Feeling optimistic, I asked my brother and his wife to watch the kids. I took Elizabeth out to a fancy restaurant for dinner and dancing. That night, we even tried to set a personal record for how many times we could make love. Although we didn't quite hit the mark, we certainly enjoyed the attempt. The next day, we picked up the kids and spent the day at a water park. I thought things were finally back on track. Then, the following Wednesday, I caught a glimpse of a message from Elizabeth to Joe, "Can't wait to see you. I miss you." It was like a knife to my heart. At that moment, I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, and everything she said to me felt like a lie. I decided not to listen to any more of her excuses. Elizabeth had betrayed not just me, but also our kids. Using the camera feature on her phone through the monitoring software, I saw Joe's face, a guy I remembered from our office. He was just another colleague. I realized I had to approach this without confrontation. Instead, I planned to take her out of our lives, make her face the consequences, and secure primary custody of our children. Around that time, Monica's school group had a concert. I shifted the reminder on Elizabeth's phone calendar to the day after the event. Sure enough, she spent the concert night at Joe's place. Afterward, I left her a message pretending she had just missed it. Monica was disappointed, but I gently explained that sometimes adults get caught up in work. Elizabeth's late arrivals became more frequent, and she'd come home smelling freshly showered while still in her work clothes. She tried to make it up to Monica, who eventually forgave her but made her promise not to miss the next concert. I couldn't tell if Elizabeth was truly remorseful or just trying to avoid getting caught. I noticed she and Joe often met at a small place famous for its Scotch eggs. One day, I casually mentioned it to my father-in-law and made a reservation for that Wednesday, their usual day. After confirming she was at the office, I headed there with her parents. We arrived just a few minutes after Elizabeth and Joe, and I spotted them talking in a booth at the back. "Do you want to sit in a booth or at a table?" I asked loudly. Elizabeth's head shot up, and she quickly moved away from him. He looked bewildered until he saw us, then tried to shrink down. As we approached, Elizabeth rushed over. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" She stammered. "We heard the Scotch eggs here are amazing, so we had to try them," her dad said with a warm smile. Happy to see her, Elizabeth introduced her lover as a colleague, pointing to the booth. Her mom and dad's expressions soured. "We wouldn't want to interrupt your lunch meeting," her mom said, glaring at him. Elizabeth insisted, saying they were just grabbing a quick bite before showing a property. The lunch was awkward after her lover reluctantly shook hands with everyone. Elizabeth tried to fill the silence with small talk, but her mum frowned at her food and her dad barely spoke, keeping his eyes fixed on the guy. I made small talk, asking him questions like how long he'd been with the company and why someone like him was still single. At one point I suggested, Elizabeth, maybe you could introduce your sister to him. If things go well, we might even be family. Elizabeth's smile was tight, and her lover finally said, thanks, but I already have a girlfriend. Oh, I said with a grin. Is she someone we know, or a secret? She's in a rough situation, trying to get out of a bad relationship. I don't feel comfortable saying who, he replied, trying to maintain his composure, but his face fell as he noticed everyone's looks, especially Elizabeth's. When our food arrived, my in-laws barely touched theirs, eating quickly. I only managed a few bites of my Scotch egg. Elizabeth noticed and asked, is the Scotch egg any good? I've lost my appetite, I replied, staring at her. Her mother motioned to the waiter and handed him a $100 bill to cover everyone's meal, then excused herself to the restroom. The waiter returned with the change, and Elizabeth's father pocketed it, giving Joe a look that could cut glass before heading to the restroom himself. Sorry to interrupt your business lunch, I told Elizabeth and Joe. I'm sure you two have plenty to talk about, and plenty of people to deceive. I got up to leave, and Elizabeth chased me out to the car. It was nice to see you at lunch, she said. We'll discuss this at home. Your parents will be here soon. By then. Her parents were practically rushing toward the entrance, clearly avoiding Joe's gaze. Elizabeth followed my line of sight, looked down, and muttered, it's probably for the best. Her parents caught up to us, gave Elizabeth a quick hug, and then got into my car without a word. We drove home in silence. When I dropped her parents off, her mum hugged me tightly and told me she loved me like the son she never had. Her father hugged me too, asking me to bring the kids over more often because he missed us. It hit me hard when I realized that Elizabeth would lie so easily to those who had near. They had always supported her. They had already distanced themselves from her younger sister, Eleonora, because of her own infidelity. Whenever Elizabeth brought her up, they'd immediately shut her down. Eleonora had once even tried to sneak into her in-laws' church during a Sunday service, and her dad had interrupted the pastor mid-sermon to apologize to the congregation before walking out, completely ignoring Eleonora. That evening, Elizabeth came home with a story about how a dinner with Joe had helped secure a major deal for both of them. I told her it was inappropriate to have dinner alone with an unmarried man. I don't want you near him anymore, and I don't want you going out with him again. Honey, I'm sorry if it bothers you, she replied. I won't go to lunch with him anymore. Don't worry, he's out of the picture. We just landed a great deal from that moment. I told her I would be sleeping in the guest room until she apologized properly to me and her parents. Remember what happened when your sister got caught cheating, I asked. She looked alarmed. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she protested. A small part of me felt relieved, though, because I had a valid reason to avoid intimacy with her. In the meantime, I took more steps to stay ahead. I installed a hidden switch in her car and in Joe's, then sabotaged the transmission sensors to confuse any mechanic working on them. One day, while I was at Frederick's football game, Elizabeth decided to meet Joe. I remotely disabled her car. Knock, knock. Joe came to the car window and asked, what happened? You came back so soon, my car won't start, she explained. The battery's fine, headlights work, but it just won't turn over. Need a ride home? He offered. No, you idiot, she replied. If my husband sees you dropping me off, it'll be a huge issue. Call a tow truck. I need to pick up Monica for her band competition. Can't your husband drive her? He asked. He's with Frederick at his game, she replied, irritated. Just take me to a rental car place and I'll call a tow truck to meet us there. Joe dropped her off and she rented a car. Unfortunately, she was late picking up Monica, who ended up calling me. I got a friend to bring Frederick home, then picked up Monica just in time for her event. When we returned, Frederick was already in his room, and Elizabeth was waiting in the living room, still in her work clothes but smelling freshly showered. I'm so sorry I couldn't pick you up, she said. My car broke down, and by the time I rented another, your dad had already come to get you. It's fine, Mom. I made it just in time thanks to Dad, Monica replied. But you've missed 2 performances now. I hope work's worth it. After Monica left the room, I confronted Elizabeth. I called your work after lunch. They said you left. You had over 2 hours to pick up Monica. What happened? She froze, then stammered I was running some errands and thought I had enough time. I didn't expect the car to break down. What errands? I asked. You never mentioned any, just things that needed handling, she replied evasively. Well, I hope those things are worth more than your daughter's respect, because you're walking on thin ice, I said as I headed to the guest room. It was clear Elizabeth was prioritizing Joe over our family, disregarding the impact on her children. The mechanics couldn't find any issues with her car, confirming that my modifications had worked perfectly. Meanwhile, Monica started pushing her buttons, saying, Mom, you promised to take me and my friends to the mall this Saturday. Can you tell me now if you're going to flake? We don't want to be stranded if your car decides to die again. Frederick overheard and laughed. Good one, Monica. Elizabeth later complained to me, saying I needed to talk to the kids about respecting her. I'll consider it when you're ready to apologize, I said from the guest room. She called my response stubborn. On Saturday, I took Monica and her friends to the mall myself. Elizabeth claimed she had work, but her car was parked at a house listed for sale. No doubt she was meeting Joe. When we returned, Monica thanked me loudly in front of her mother, making it clear who she appreciated more. Elizabeth called a friend and completely ignored Monica's questions. Elizabeth looked like she wanted to complain, but I started laughing, took my drink and headed into my office. She still had on her work clothes but smelled freshly showered. I couldn't shake the feeling she'd had some fun in one of the houses she was selling. Hopefully she at least changed the sheets. With Frederick's birthday coming up, we rented 6 lanes at a bowling alley to celebrate with friends and family. Finding a spot on a Wednesday night without a league took some effort, but I made it happen. When I shared the plans with Elizabeth, she looked uneasy, so I told her I'd take the kids and their friends while she picked up the cake and candles. We'd have pizza, open presents, and bowl. The week before, I had sabotaged Joe's car 3 times to stop their meetings. They rescheduled for Tuesday, so I broke his car again once it was fixed. Then, on Wednesday, I saw Elizabeth's text. Looking forward to seeing you later this afternoon. Her GPS showed her heading to Joe's apartment. She'd have enough time to enjoy herself, grab the cake, and still make it to the party. I rented a car with a large trunk for a little plan I'd cooked up. After confirming Elizabeth was at Joe's apartment, I placed a covered cage by the front door. Using a door ram, I smashed the door open, activated a taser against the metal cage, and released an angry skunk inside. As I hurried away, I listened through Elizabeth's phone, and the screams were priceless. Joe was yelling at her to call the police. I blocked her phone, so he had to make the call himself, claiming a wild animal had invaded his apartment. When the police arrived, guns drawn, the skunk went on the attack, making them scream and gag before they could manage to shut the door. It took hours for animal control to capture the skunk. Afterward, 2 officers questioned Elizabeth and Joe, and 2 more arrived but quickly left because of the stench. Who's the owner here? One officer asked. I am, Joe replied. And who are you? The officer asked. Elizabeth, she replied, handing over her ID. The officer looked at her skeptically. How do you 2 know each other? He asked. We work together, Elizabeth answered. What were you doing here? The officer pressed. Picking up some documents, she replied. After confirming their identities, the officer asked, so why was there a skunk in the apartment? It was a birthday present, Joe began to explain, but Elizabeth interrupted. Did you buy an adult skunk for your boyfriend? The officer asked, eyebrows raised. He's not my boyfriend, Elizabeth shot back. Stop lying. Why'd you buy an adult skunk as a gift? The officer pressed. Elizabeth stumbled. I didn't. I meant to get a younger one. He mentioned that he was fond of skunks, so I thought it would be a pleasant surprise, but it turned out to be an adult and, well, it attacked him. The skunk must have been costly, the officer remarked. Not much, she replied, trying to downplay it. So do you buy expensive pets for all your co-workers, or just your boyfriend? The officer questioned again. Elizabeth remained silent. Finally, one officer, clearly frustrated, said, I know this story doesn't make sense, but I can't tolerate the smell anymore. You and your friend can leave. I'm not ruining my car with that stench. They exited, slamming the damaged door behind them. What was that all about? Joe asked, confused. Elizabeth, always quick on her feet, responded, we couldn't exactly tell them someone broke your door and let a skunk loose in here. Why not? He asked. Because then they'd ask my husband if he was involved, and he'd either know or they'd tell him I was here, she answered smoothly. Speaking of honesty, Joe, how many other women are you seeing? None, he answered, surprised. When was the last time you slept with someone else besides me? She pressed. About a month ago, he mumbled. So you've been with her the whole time? Elizabeth asked. There was another one, 6 months ago, he confessed. Were they married? She asked. Why would you assume that? He replied. Because I know the type of thrill you're after, Elizabeth said, irritated. Answer me. Yes, both were married, he muttered. Did their husbands find out? She asked. I don't know, he sighed. Great. Now I know lying to the police was the right choice, she muttered. This is probably payback from one of those husbands. I'll find out if my husband was behind this, she said. At that moment her phone rang. Hey Elizabeth, did you pick up the cake yet? I casually asked. I'm still at work, but I'm leaving now, she replied. Don't let Frederick down, I said, and she assured me she was on her way. Elizabeth showered, dressed, and left Joe's place. I remotely disabled her car halfway to the store. After several attempts, she managed to get it started, but it broke down 3 more times before she finally made it to the bakery. She arrived late at the bowling alley, and as she entered with the cake, everyone covered their noses, coughing from the overwhelming skunk odor. Frederick simply asked her to go home after the party. On the drive home, he turned to me and asked, Dad, why does Mum always miss our events? She tries to do what's best for the family, but sometimes it's tough to be in 2 places at once, I replied. But you're always here, and you make more money, Fred pointed out. Well, my job is more flexible, so it's easier for me to be around my favorite skunks, I joked. Not funny, Dad, Monica chimed in. It'll be funny when you tell your friends at school tomorrow, I replied. We had to throw out the skunk-scented cake, which the kids thought was hilarious. I was more than happy to return to the guest room that night. A few days later, I caught Elizabeth sniffing around my car, looking like a mouse searching for cheese. I followed her upstairs and even recorded her sniffing my shoes. I never asked her why her own car didn't smell like skunk. 2 Saturdays later, I told the family I was heading to the hardware store. Nobody wanted to join, so I went alone to Joe's apartment. His car was there, and when I knocked, he opened the door looking confused. Can I help you? He asked. I think we can help each other. I'm Elizabeth's husband. Mind if I come in? I asked, pushing my way into the kitchen, where the smell of fresh paint mixed with lingering skunk odor. They had bought all new furniture. Look, I know you've been with my wife for over 6 months, I stated. Hey man, we're just friends, Joe stammered. Would it help if I showed you pictures and videos of your meetings? I challenged. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. No games. I know you've been with my wife and I have proof. I'm not here to talk about you, though I'm focused on her. Instead of being a detective to gather more dirt, I figured I'd just pay you for it. He stared at me, eyes narrowing. You want me to film myself with your wife? That'll cost $2,000. Yes, $2,000 for a video showing her face and body during the act. I'll also need written consent from you stating that you filmed it and allowed me to use it, I said. If you already have evidence, why do you need a video? He asked skeptically. I need leverage for the divorce, I replied. That's really cold, he said. Cold like how she betrays me and our kids, I shot back. After a long pause, he muttered, yeah, just like that, then added, make it $3,000 and we have a deal. Deal. Don't tell Elizabeth. I'll arrange and pay for a spa and hotel stay, I said. The following Monday, I called Joe to set up a time to get the video and pay him in cash. All clear? I asked. Yes, he replied. Make sure her face is visible in the footage. I'll send the consent form today and call you on Monday, I said, then left to go about my day. On Wednesday evening, I told Elizabeth the first had a conference this Saturday. Any issues with that? I asked. No, actually sounds like a relaxing weekend. Have fun, she replied. On Monday night, I called Joe and picked him up. Not wanting to be recorded, I took him to a quiet rest stop, checked him for any devices, and led him back into the car. Do you have what I need? I asked. Yes, he replied, handing me a flash drive. I checked the video on my laptop. It was exactly what I'd asked for, along with the consent form. He handed me an envelope, and I verified its contents, then took a photo and sent it to myself. I handed him an envelope of cash, and he counted the $100 bills twice, grinning. If you need another video, let me know. Easiest money I ever made, he said. On Tuesday, I sat down with my brother and his wife, showing them a short video, some photos, and a list of Elizabeth's absences from family events. I did the same with Elizabeth's parents and mine, asking them all to ignore her until I gave the green light. On Wednesday, while Elizabeth was out with Joe, I sat the kids down to explain that Mom was involved with someone else and that I wasn't sure if she still loved me. They asked if we were getting a divorce. We'll discuss it with her. Right now she's at her boyfriend's house, I replied. Both of them gasped. She's there now, Monica asked. Yes, I replied, showing them the GPS tracker on her car outside Joe's apartment. Is that why Mum misses our events, Monica asked. I showed them a dated list of her absences from family events, along with a time-lapse tracker of her locations during Monica's concert and Frederick's birthday. When they saw the timestamps of when she left the office and then Joe's apartment, they both exclaimed, "That skunk." I reassured them, the most important thing is that I love you both. This is between your mother and me, and we'll do everything we can to stay a family. After half an hour of crying, hugging, and talking, Elizabeth walked in, seeing our faces. She looked nervous. What happened? She asked, trying to keep her composure. Kids, go to your rooms. Mum and I need to talk, I said. They hugged me, shot her a hurt look, and went to their rooms. When the doors closed, I asked Elizabeth to sit down. What's going on? She asked, trying to keep her composure. Elizabeth, I know you're having an affair. Oh God, no, that's not true. I'd never cheat on you. Why would you say that? She tried to sound sincere, even tearing up. If you won't be honest, this conversation is over, I said, keeping my tone firm. This must be a mistake. Someone thought they saw something that wasn't true, she said, trying to convince me. Fine, we're done here. Think about what you're doing to this family. We'll talk tomorrow. Until then, stay away from me and the kids, I said, heading for the guest room. Elizabeth followed me, insisting you're wrong. After firmly closing the door, I heard Elizabeth's soft voice outside Monica's room, pleading, Monica, what did Dad tell you? It's all a misunderstanding. Please open up so we can talk. Shortly after, Monica texted me, can you make her leave? I replied, I'll try, but she's denying everything, so there's no point. Maybe you're mistaken, Monica responded. I have pictures of them together, I answered. Oh, and that was all she sent back. Opening the door, I saw Elizabeth standing there, desperation in her eyes. Stay away from the kids until we settle this. You're only making things harder for them, I told her. But I need to know what you told them, she pressed. I told them the truth, that you're seeing someone else. This is between us, don't drag them in, I replied. Elizabeth then went to her bedroom, and I heard her crying all night. The next day, I waited for her in the kitchen. When she walked in, I asked, have you considered what you're doing to this family? She nodded, looking regretful. Are you ready to be truthful about the affair? I asked, and she nodded again. It's all a misunderstanding. I formed an emotional bond, we just had lunch a few times, nothing more. You're the only one I love, she explained. If you lie again, this conversation ends here. We'll talk Saturday at 9, and the kids will stay with my parents. Think hard about what this is doing to us, I said, moving to the guest room. On Saturday morning, I had breakfast with the kids at her parents' house. When I got home, Elizabeth was waiting in the kitchen. Are you ready to speak honestly? I asked. She nodded. Did you tell my parents? I continued, and she said, yes. Did you inform your family? I pressed. Yes, she whispered. Why would you do this to me? She asked, her voice breaking. You lied to me, the kids, everyone. Now you say it was just a few kisses. But you think our parents and kids turned against you because of me? Her face fell, but she replied, you're blowing this out of proportion. If you can't be honest, we're done here. The kids will stay with their grandparents, and I'll work from home in the guest room. We'll talk on Tuesday after work. Think about what this is doing to the family, I said, leaving. That night, after dinner with my parents and the kids, I returned to find Elizabeth in the living room. "We'll talk on Tuesday," I said, heading to bed. Elizabeth's friends messaged me, asking me to forgive her, saying it was a minor mistake. I made a video call and showed them evidence of the affair. They apologized, visibly embarrassed, and I doubt she ever heard from them again. On Tuesday evening, Elizabeth came home looking exhausted, bringing pasta from our favorite Italian restaurant and setting a plate before me. All this time, thinking up lies to tell family and friends. It wears on you, doesn't it? I asked. "No one will speak to me, they all think I'm a monster," she replied. "Lies have consequences, Elizabeth. You revealed the monster in yourself," I said. "They told me you showed them photos and videos of me with Joe," she remarked. "Yes, I did, but I didn't let extra copies circulate because I don't want our family humiliated," I responded. "Can I see them?" she asked. "Yes, if it helps," I said, showing her the photos and videos. "I love you so much, can't we?" "Move past this," she pleaded. "If you love me, why did you need someone else?" I asked. "I never loved him. Marriage is about shared responsibilities, trust and happiness. I always fulfilled my responsibilities, trusted you, and found joy in our life, but you left me to handle most of the finances and family matters while you went out," I said. She looked down, silent. "You stole my love by giving yours away." I added. "How long have you known?" she whispered. 7 months, I replied. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. "I hoped it was a one-time mistake." "I waited for your honesty, especially since you kept saying you loved me," I answered. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "How can I trust you now?" I questioned. "Because I love you and am being truthful." She replied. "Is this the same truth you gave in our last talks when you denied everything?" I asked. She fell silent for a few minutes. I finally asked, "What will you do to make things right?" I placed an envelope on the table. "This is a post-nuptial agreement. Sign it, and I'll consider giving us another chance. But we'll need therapy for ourselves and the kids if we're to make it work. I don't want to sign a post-nuptial agreement," she said. "Then we're done. It seems you're more interested in a financial advantage than saving our marriage. What would I get if I sign it?" she asked. "If either of us files for divorce, I get 70% of our assets. If I cheat, it's 50-50. If you cheat, I get 85%, and in every case I receive full custody. Have a lawyer review it and sign it, then I'll consider moving forward." "How much time do I have?" she asked. "Until Saturday morning," I replied, standing up. "Are you going to eat? I got your favorite meal," she said. "After everything, should I expect poison in the sauce?" I asked, walking away. Elizabeth began to cry, but later signed the agreement to rebuild some trust. The next day I stopped by her office while she was out and spoke with her manager, an older woman whose husband owned the business. "How can I help you today?" she asked coolly. "I think there's a misunderstanding about me being the bad guy with my wife," I explained. "This seems personal. Please leave, or I'll call security," she replied. "It's about my wife and a coworker she's been involved with," I added. "Do you have proof?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, here are photos and recordings of them together instead of working," I said, playing some clips. Her face soured. "Will my wife be fired?" I asked. "Yes, along with her colleague," she replied. "You can't fire him. I had permission to record my wife, not him. This can't be used in court, and I'd rather avoid any defamation claims," I added. "Thank you for the information," she said, clearly relieved. "Can I leave a photo?" I asked. "No, I don't want this spreading in the office," she replied. Elizabeth came home in tears that evening, saying she'd been fired without a reference. She wanted to talk, but I simply said Saturday and went to my room. On Saturday morning, she sat at the kitchen table. "You should have quit as soon as this started to avoid contact with Joe. Clearly, your judgment is flawed," I said. "We should have discussed this," she replied. "Sorry, but we no longer discuss choices that harm our family. Have you signed the post-nuptial agreement?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, handing me the signed document. I reviewed it, sent a digital copy to my lawyer, and secured the original in a safe. Then I established new house rules. If she behaved, we'd begin counseling, and I'd inform the family we were trying to reconcile. Secretly, I had no real plan to start counseling. Elizabeth tried to act as the ideal wife, but I soon noticed she'd installed a hidden camera in my office. Observing her through the window as she set up on my laptop from the car, I joined her in the kitchen the next Saturday. She sat confidently, sipping her coffee. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're with my parents," she answered. "Why, it's been a while since we've been close. I thought I could change your mind, she hinted. Actually, it's been 8 months, I replied. 8 months? That can't be right, she argued. It is? Maybe you lost track while you were busy with other things, I said. Well, we could fix that, she replied, giving me a suggestive smile. Elizabeth, I can't erase what you did or those images etched in my mind. It's not happening, I responded, gesturing for her to sit down. Fine, be stubborn. I did everything you asked, yet you still treat me like an outsider. I deserve respect, she retorted. Is this really how you want to handle it, I asked. Yes, I even deleted every piece of evidence, the copies, the cloud backups, and the flash drive. I'm tired of feeling like an outcast. I'll be staying with my sister until you start respecting me. I'll pick the kids up from school each day, and we'll have dinner at my place without you, she said, heading to the door. Her sister, Eleonora, stepped out from the dining room, and they left together. Over the next 2 months, Elizabeth worked to convince her parents and our kids that I'd fabricated the entire story, claiming the photos were fake and that I had no real proof. She even dared me to show evidence, but by then she had erased everything. The kids felt confused, and her parents wanted to believe her. Even my own family had doubts. Thankfully, my brother and his wife stood by me. Feeling isolated, I met with Joe to arrange a new video. This time I went all out, a beachfront hotel room in Florida, 2 first-class tickets, and $5,000 for the video. I insisted it be filmed on the balcony. Joe asked for extra money for an upscale restaurant, so I bought an additional first-class ticket for Eleonora, who was eager to join. 2 weeks later, I reviewed the new footage in my car, confirming everything was as I specified. I encrypted the video, uploaded it to the cloud, and saved a copy on a secure flash drive. As we drove back, I questioned Joe. Did you approach my wife first, I asked. Not really, it just happened, he replied. And who initiated the idea of being together, I pressed. She did, he responded. I then asked, how many other married women around here have you been with? 7, he answered, listing their names. I turned off the recorder in my pocket. Want to see something wild, I asked, accelerating to 70 mph. What are you doing, man, he shouted. Here's the crazy part, I said, veering sharply toward a wooded area and braking hard. We hit a tree at just under 40 mph. Both of us were hurt but survived. The police arrived, confiscating my laptop and flash drive as evidence. After a hospital check, I returned home, bedridden for a week. Elizabeth heard about the accident and Joe's death soon after, calling to probe for details, but I played dumb. The next day, the police came by to question me about my wife's connection to the deceased. I explained that I paid Joe to stay away from her, but he kept demanding more, which led to the crash. Are you suggesting I crashed the car on purpose to eliminate him, I asked. The officers soon left. Yes, I had the motive and opportunity, but who would risk their life by slamming into a tree just to get rid of someone? Days later, Elizabeth called, suggesting we discuss our marriage on neutral ground with her sister present. I don't want this conversation recorded. Let's meet at a hotel, she proposed. Not at the house, but I'll pick the room, I replied, suspicious. She protested, citing safety concerns, but I insisted on avoiding any recordings. We agreed to meet on Saturday. Upon arrival, I followed Elizabeth and Eleonora to the front desk. The receptionist offered room 216, but I requested a higher floor with a view of the entrance. Both women looked disappointed, likely realizing they'd have to pay extra to retrieve any recording equipment left in room 216. In the elevator, Eleonora flirted, pressing close to my side. I reminded her this discussion is between me and Elizabeth usually. Eleonora kept her distance from me, but today she acted differently. The room was basic with a desk, chair, dresser, and queen-size bed. So what now? Elizabeth asked. Take off your clothes, completely undress. I don't trust you, and you don't trust me, I said. Elizabeth glanced at Eleonora, surprised. That's my sister, I don't want her seeing me like this, come on. Elizabeth, I said dryly. She's seen plenty already. Eleonora stuck her tongue out at me, revealing a piercing. Fine, Elizabeth agreed, perhaps a bit too willingly, as she started undressing. I undressed quickly as well, folding my clothes on the desk and hiding a pen behind them. The pen resembled the hotel's standard pen, but had weight and contained a hidden camera. I had gathered free pens from every nearby hotel, modifying one to fit the camera. Placing my clothes in the bathroom, I returned, fully aware of their watchful eyes. Now that we're all here, let's begin, I said, ignoring Eleonora's attempts to catch my eye. Elizabeth, I want a serious talk, I said firmly. In a few minutes you'll understand the real reason for this, Elizabeth said sweetly. I love you, I replied, keeping my tone steady. Like an old pair of shoes, she shot back, her sarcasm evident. You know that's not true. I really love you, Elizabeth insisted. As long as the credit card works, I replied. Elizabeth's tone grew sharp. Don't be so bitter, our marriage can withstand this strong. You drained every ounce of strength from us, stabbed me repeatedly in the back, and now expect me to forgive you. I replied, voice pained. Stop being so dramatic, it was just a mistake, she retorted. A mistake that's ending in divorce, I replied. Come on, don't be like that, it was just a minor slip-up, she pleaded. It wasn't small, it was calculated betrayal, I countered, mocking her. I mimicked. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it would hurt you. I'm sorry I lied, I stopped lying as soon as you confronted me, she insisted. You mean when you denied it at first? Or when you claimed it was just an emotional bond? Or the third time, when you said it was a single kiss? I challenged. You only stopped lying when you saw the photos, but that doesn't mean you won't lie again, right? Eleonora, sensing the tension, interrupted. Maybe we should all avoid saying things we'll regret. Are you serious? I retorted. Eleonora, how many married men have you seduced? Elizabeth quietly apologized. I'm so sorry for everything I did. Feeling sorry isn't enough. My goal is to ensure you feel that guilt deeply, I said coldly. It's not that bad, Elizabeth replied, downplaying it. What's the difference between you and a con artist? You earn my trust only to betray it, I responded. I didn't deceive you. Marriage is a contract of faithfulness, and you broke it, she argued. I kept my end. It was you who betrayed me, I shot back. You forced me into signing that post-nuptial agreement. It wasn't fair, Elizabeth complained. Unfair? If I get a ticket, I pay the fine. If I evade taxes, they seize my assets. If I drink excessively, I end up in jail. Rule breakers should be held accountable. Marriage is about family and loyalty. What's the purpose otherwise? I explained, but Elizabeth was silent, lost for words. Do you know what percentage of marriages that begin with infidelity last more than a few years? Just 5%, I questioned. Was it your plan to leave me and marry him? Joe's gone now, so we'll never know, I added, striking a nerve. Elizabeth's face twisted in anger. I erased all your so-called evidence. You can't control me anymore. Our parents and the kids don't know what to think. Was it worth it? She sneered. I didn't ruin this marriage, you did. I'm just recognizing the end, I replied. Elizabeth shot back. Maybe I wouldn't have been with someone else if you had paid more attention to me. Why should I, when you barely noticed me? I countered. We sat in tense silence, both attempting to stay calm. Did you get rid of him? Elizabeth suddenly asked. I smiled slightly, glancing at the camera hidden in the pen. It was an accident, I responded. How could you do that? She tried, aiming to provoke me, but I remained silent as tears filled her eyes. He was a good man, she whispered. Allowing a trace of anger, I replied, Oh, you mean the kind of man who seduces married women? Elizabeth began crying. But you still love me, don't you? Correction, I loved you, I clarified. True love is rare even in marriage. You had that from me, and all I got in return was your craving for wealth and faithfulness on my end. You threw away real love for trivial thrills. Sure, plenty might want you for a fling, but no. One will love you as I did not after what you did to me and the kids. I concluded. Elizabeth's face crumpled as tears fell. She quickly composed herself and shifted her tone. Anyone else want a drink? She asked. I'll go to the bar and return so we can talk like adults. She dressed and left the room. As soon as the door shut, Eleanor looked at me and said, You look good enough to eat now. Is not the time I warned. Eleanor approached, standing between my legs. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. I was trying to push her back when she suddenly pulled me onto the bed, yelling, Please, stop. Elizabeth burst in, phone in hand. What are you doing to my sister? She shouted. Eleanor cried out. He attacked me. Make him stop. Elizabeth pushed me back, smirking as she dropped her phone, likely uploading the video. You're in trouble now, she taunted. I have footage of you assaulting her. The two laughed while I feigned defeat, sinking into my chair. Elizabeth wagged her finger and declared, Here's how this divorce will work. The post-nuptial agreement. Forget it. Mention it, and I'll ensure you go to jail. You'll get 10% of everything. I'll get 90%, along with full custody and lifelong support. Refuse. And the video will secure your conviction. Yes, I replied, realizing I'd underestimated her tactics. Eleanor dressed quickly. Come on. Elizabeth, she said. Just moments ago, Elizabeth had been crying over lost love, yet now she was leaving with her sister, both laughing at me. I watched them walk out, then retrieved my pen and left the hotel. The meeting had gone better than expected. The following day, Elizabeth was served with divorce papers, enforcing the postnuptial terms. When she threatened to use her recording, I responded, "You didn't erase everything. Try to frame me, and I'll be free the next day while you're locked up." Elizabeth was sharp enough to wait. Both of us hired lawyers, and I insisted that the postnuptial be upheld. I presented transcripts of my recordings, explaining to her lawyer that we were restoring deleted files but had transcripts available in the meantime. After prolonged discussions, a court date was set to determine if the agreement was valid and if I had solid evidence. Days before the trial, I mailed forged letters to Elizabeth and Eleanor, posing as the CBC, notifying them that Joe had tested positive for AIDS and advising immediate testing. The letter instructed them to refrain from intimacy for a year until they were cleared. At trial, the judge wasn't pleased with either of us. Elizabeth alleged that the postnuptial was signed under pressure and denied infidelity, shedding convincing tears. I argued that the agreement was essential due to her unfaithfulness and that her actions made her unfit as a parent. "What proof do you have of her infidelity?" the judge asked. My lawyer submitted the video and audio recordings, which matched the transcripts we provided. The judge turned to me, "Why are you presenting these recordings now? We retrieved them after a lengthy data recovery process. Elizabeth deleted the originals, and certified data recovery takes time. We recently received the restored files," my lawyer explained. The judge then addressed me. "Did Elizabeth attempt to delete the recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor. We even have a recording where she admits it. She believed I had control over the videos and thought she'd erased everything, but I backed them up in multiple places," I replied. Judges don't take kindly to tampering, and Elizabeth had lied about not cheating, claiming I had no proof. When asked if the transcripts matched the recordings, Elizabeth's lawyer confirmed, "Yes." "Your Honor, do you dispute the authenticity of this recording?" the judge asked Elizabeth's lawyer, who shook his head slightly. "No, Your Honor." This addressed the validity question and dismissed claims of coercion, though it didn't solely confirm infidelity post-agreement. "Yes, Your Honor. Here's the final video transcript and the video itself, showing Elizabeth's infidelity after signing the agreement," my lawyer added. The judge looked at him. "Why introduce this now?" "This evidence was with the police as part of an accidental death inquiry, and we weren't sure it still existed," my lawyer clarified. The judge asked Elizabeth's lawyer, "Have you reviewed this video?" "Yes, Your Honor, but we argue it's inadmissible since there's no consent form and no proof it was recorded after the agreement," he countered. "My client paid for Elizabeth, Eleanor, and her lover's flights and their hotel room," my lawyer stated. The judge turned to me. "Did you consent to your wife's affair?" "No, Your Honor, I never condoned it," I replied. "Then why pay for their tickets and hotel?" the judge pressed. I asked her lover how much it would take to leave her alone. He asked for $2,000, tickets to Jamaica, and a 3-night stay at a 5-star hotel. I agreed and bought vouchers, but he used them for a Florida trip the next week while she was supposedly at a conference, I explained. "How can we verify it's the right hotel?" the judge asked. "The hotel sign is visible in the first photo," I pointed out. "How did you obtain this footage?" the judge continued. "I paid for it when I discovered my wife's affair," I replied. I responded, "Why were you gathering this evidence?" the judge inquired. "For the divorce," I answered. "Did he understand why you were collecting this?" the judge questioned further. "Yes, months ago I explained it was simpler and cheaper to obtain the proof from him rather than hiring a detective. I paid him $500 for an extra video," I clarified. Elizabeth broke the postnuptial agreement. If testimony is needed to verify the date and authenticity of the videos, her sister Eleonora is right here, I said, indicating Eleonora. Everyone turned to look at her, and the judge reprimanded me for using disrespectful language. I promptly apologized. The judge asked, "Is that all you obtained from your wife's lover that evening?" Looking at Elizabeth, I replied, "Yes." "But he provided most of the documents you have here, keeping track of everything for months, including hotel bills and flights." Elizabeth's face flushed as she realized her lover had been selling these details to me for the divorce, only costing her $3,000. She would have paid 10 times that to keep it secret. Although enraged, I could see her calculating, assuming I had nothing more since I would have shown it already. Once I finished, Elizabeth quickly whispered to her lawyer, who then requested a break as we approached lunchtime. The judge allowed it. Upon our return, Elizabeth's lawyer claimed they had footage proving I had been unfaithful, violating the postnup, and that both Elizabeth and Eleonora were prepared to verify its legitimacy. Elizabeth confirmed my sister and I didn't want to imprison the father of my kids, but now I see how manipulative he truly is. The video displayed a hotel door, someone shouting, "Please stop," and Elizabeth entering, recording me on top of Eleonora. Elizabeth's voice in the video yelled, "What are you doing to my sister?" as Eleonora cried. "He attacked me." Elizabeth then grabbed her sister, dropped the phone, and the video ended. "What happened next?" the judge asked. I locked myself in the bathroom and warned my husband that if he didn't leave in 2 minutes, I'd call the police. I also told him I'd uploaded the video to the cloud. Elizabeth replied, "Yes, I see," the judge noted, giving me a skeptical look. I noticed Elizabeth's parents glaring at me with suspicion. The judge then asked for my side. My lawyer answered, "We have a video that contradicts this claim." Elizabeth's lawyer tried to object, arguing it was irrelevant, but the judge permitted it. Elizabeth's lawyer slumped, defeated, as Elizabeth looked pale. The video opened with a discussion on needing to undress to avoid recording devices and concluded with Elizabeth and Eleonora leaving the room laughing. The judge looked at me, a glint of understanding in his eyes, hinting at shared life experience. Elizabeth murmured to her lawyer, who shook his head, resigned. My lawyer confirmed that none of my words in the video were incriminating, frustrating Elizabeth. Her initial goal was to sweetly convince me to forgive her. Her secondary plan was to trap me with incriminating evidence linked to her lover's death. The staged attack on Eleonora backfired. Eleonora tried slipping out of the courtroom, but the video showed her initiating contact by pulling me onto the bed, forcing her to sit back down. Elizabeth was visibly ashamed, her parents sighed heavily behind her, and some relatives exited the courtroom before the video ended. Elizabeth realized she had lost their support. The judge ruled in favor of upholding the postnup. My lawyer then exposed Elizabeth's hidden bank account, which held more than our shared assets combined. She had been depositing extra paychecks and bonuses there for years and even took a second mortgage on her home. I had asked my lawyer not to bring up the secret account, but he presented my own bank records, showing that Elizabeth had transferred our mortgage funds to her hidden account. This revealed her concealed assets. The second mortgage transfer had been my doing. Using her login credentials, I found her hidden account by installing tracking software. According to divorce law, undisclosed funds fall under specific regulations. The judge granted me 100% of our shared assets and required Elizabeth to cover all legal fees and court costs. Due to her greed, she had shifted all property to her secret account, meaning I owed her no share of the house's value. The judge also sentenced Elizabeth and Eleonora to 90 days in jail for lying under oath. I received 95% of our assets, full custody of the children, the house, 2 of our best cars, and several years of alimony. Elizabeth was left with just 5%, which didn't even cover her legal costs. She kept her clothing, car, and some jewelry, though I had sold her more expensive items after discovering her affair. She hadn't noticed since I stopped taking her out. The money from her jewelry and accident insurance paid for my dream car. Elizabeth struggled to stay involved with the children and had to commute an hour to her job. They never forgave her and felt humiliated being seen with her. Both she and Eleonora ended up as bar waitresses. I also sent Joe's last messages to the husbands of 6 women he had been involved with, along with the drunken texts Elizabeth occasionally sent me. Sometimes she blames me for her ruined life and wishes I were dead. Other times, she cries, begs for forgiveness, and pleads for us to reunite. I save each message and video in case she tries to interfere in the kids' lives. Elizabeth never truly loved me as I loved her for her. Life was about what she could take, not what she could give. Now I have a restraining order against her and Eleonora, as they may still hold a grudge against me.